Trey Sermon versus the 49ers running back field. That is some of the dynasty bets you're going to need to make this offseason, as well as dynasty roster size dictating some of your mid to late round rookie draft strategy and selection, plus more from the Football Guys dynasty forums and quotes and dynasty trades this week. I'm your host, Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara, and welcome to the Football Guys Dynasty Show. And the 49ers backfield, Jordan, we were just doing some research before we kickstarted, and Trey Sermon, both of us have reacted of saying we're surprised he's not a little more expensive in rookie drafts. And the fact that he's going, mid-ish first round in one quarterback, and you're getting the most expensive of everybody else is Raheem Mostert, maybe late second, and Jeff Wilson certainly less expensive than that. Wade Gallman, keep moving in that direction. So it was crowded before this, but Trey Sermon offers an opportunity where he could run with this backfield at some point during his rookie year. But the question is, with Mostert being a throw-in type valuation, certainly waiver wire / near free of a roster spot for anyone else, in that field category. And then you have Trey Sermon, easily the most expensive. So in terms of navigating this backfield from a cost perspective in your dynasty leagues, how do you assess Sermon versus the field?
I want to chip in a chair. That's, I think, the easiest thing is I want a piece of it in some way, shape, or form. And so I've had residual shares of Gallman. I think they probably turn into a bust would be my hunch as we sit here right now, but crazier things have happened. One of the things that really impressed me when I was listening to the 49ers press conference after the draft was they basically said, listen, we don't draft guys on day 2 unless we think that they could be starters for us. I think other teams in that division do that, where they draft role players on day 2. Tutu Atwell is kind of a case in point in that with the Rams. They said that about Trey Sermon, which I think is really interesting. The other thing they said about Trey Sermon was, listen, we've had problems. We've had a lack of continuity in our backfield, and we could debate how much that matters. It apparently matters to them. And, given you and I were talking about this beforehand, since Kyle Shanahan has left Cleveland, and that was in 2014. So 2 years in Atlanta, 4 years with San Francisco. He has been in the top. He's been in the top half of the NFL in yardage, and that includes a lot of games with Nick Mullins, with CJ Beathard, Jimmy Garoppolo, and he has basically never finished worse than 16th in the past 6 years in terms of yardage. When you look at some of the rushing stuff, it's constantly all but 1 year has been in the top 12 in terms of rushing touchdowns, for example. He's constantly in the top 20 in terms of rushing yards. When you look at all of that, it's a very high-end upside. The other thing I would say about Trey Sermon is, if your analysis of Trey Sermon is, hey, this is Keyshawn Vaughn all over again, you're doing it wrong. You're just doing it wrong. Because we could have poked a lot of holes at the Keyshawn Vaughn elevating situation thing. One of the things that I had a real problem with that last year was he didn't have a need to do that. The market didn't dictate that because there were other options. There were other competing options. He was going over guys at his position that he shouldn't have been going over. And that's how the situation impacted him. When you put bad first round wide receivers, bad profiles up against for wide receivers, and you put good day 2 profiles at wide receivers, they look exactly like round 3 running backs have historically looked. That's what they look like. So when you say, hey, your vaulting situation, actually, if you're putting him in the top 10 of rookie picks and start 1, we took him as early as 6 and start 1. I think that's absolutely the spot for him. And because it's a bet unlike any other bet in this class at the cost. It's a bet that, I put out on Twitter, and people didn't get what I was doing, but no one said that Trey Sermon, in response to my tweet, which is who can be a franchise-changing player. No one said Trey Sermon. Right? There's maybe 6 of them in this class, and there's 4 running backs, there's a wide receiver, and there's a tight end in terms of the non-quarterbacks, and Sermon's one of them. And where there's a shortage of supply of difference-making running backs this year, he should go higher. And that's sort of my take on Sermon this year. We've been aggressive with him, as aggressive. You've been luckier than me in trading up. I've had 0 success in doing that this year. But you've been, I think, more successful in getting shares just because I haven't been able to get to the spot. But this is, to me, is for the first time since Kamara. This is a Kamara to New Orleans type situation. I think it's the first time that I've done it since Kamara that said that this is the priority landing spot. And given everything else, all the other factors, I think it's a smash rookie pick.
Yeah, they were both trade up scenarios, both very specifically targeted by their NFL team and front office. The 49ers last year, again, with their ragtag group, quick quiz, who was number 1, number 2, and number 3 in running back touches. I don't think many people would get that right, on their first guess last year. The point is, and you mentioned they can do it with less. But again, I think the teams that run committees or run their running back core how we would do it, with just a bunch of guys, a bunch of specific profiles, but not a lot of heavy investment, that the NFL teams that do that, I don't think that's their plan A. I think it devolves into that where they don't find the right value in the NFL draft. They don't want to spend in free agency beyond a certain point, and they don't want to bring in a 29-year-old because they don't think there's a bunch of upside there, Mark Ingram type, later in their career. So I don't think it's plan A or even B that they get to that point. Yes, they're in a good system to run that sort of operation, but the 49ers were number 3 in the NFL in PPR scoring by the running back position last year with 0 pedigree. So for as much as we have seen in spots with Raheem Mostert, 0 pedigree there. Jeff Wilson, great story, UNT alma mater, North Texas there, but 0 pedigree there. And then you've got, JaMychal Hasty last year, right? We saw a little smattering of JaMychal Hasty. Wayne Gallman added, again, minimal pedigree guy. I mean, midday 3 is what we're looking at. This is really the first time. And during your opening argument there, I'm surprised. I'll leave your researched factoid that I think is applicable right here about Kyle Shanahan and running back investment in a second. But the point is, this is one of the best running back environments in the NFL, and they finally spent draft capital at the position. And so he's really coming at a perfect spot. You mentioned I've been pretty fortunate. I mean, in one league, I was super aggressive. If you have an idea of ADP, then you kind of know where you need to get. And I did a lot of super flex drafts before I had one quarterback of kind of knowing the lay of the land. And in one quarterback, to me, there's a clear top 5, but Sermon is 6. And every draft, this is almost like Alvin Kamara. We kind of mentioned like there was a big 6 that year, and then Alvin Kamara, it's like, well, there he is. He's number 7. And sometimes he went 8, 11, whatever. It depended on the league. But if you wanted to get him, you were locked and loaded, ready to go at 7. And I think the same case applies here for Trey Sermon at 6. Now, you may get fortunate. He may drift to 7 or 8 in those types of formats. If someone takes Devonta Smith or Jalen Waddle, every once in a while I've seen someone take Trevor Lawrence in a 1 quarterback ahead of Sermon. But if you want to make sure, and so in one of these leagues I had like 111, 205, 211. I traded them all pre-draft, get to 6, because I know if something else happens, I'll have a look at Sermon and somebody else. But I know for sure that's the floor. That's the floor outcome of trading, in my opinion, these relatively frivolous seconds. If you're going to actually stick and pick with mid and late seconds, I think that is a de-optimized scenario this year. So in a 1 quarterback especially, I am perfectly willing, and I've advised many people that use those as a vehicle to move up in round 1 and get what you want. And we actually did a deal like that, right? We traded a bunch of second round picks to get cornerstone type player, a cornerstone pick. Those are the types of moves, I think, in a relatively thin draft where I do like the top picks. I like them quite a bit. And Etienne has been my top owned player through a good cross section of rookie drafts early on here, but Sermon is in the top 3 or 4 of my most owned players. And he's a little more variant in where he goes, but obviously he's cheaper than Harris, than Etienne, than Jamar Chase, Kyle Pitts. So he has more of a range where, okay, when we get to this point, every pick I'm just going to start offering to trade up. And you get there because I think one thing that you said, and I just want to highlight to pass it back, is he is one of the few guys that if he gets this job at some point this year, and again, look at the capital, undrafted, low-level investment in Wayne Gallman, Jermichael Hasty, zero pedigree. And then you have a guy that was handpicked and chosen with round 3 investment and starting his rookie contract of minimum 4 years of with and tied to that team. There is big time upside, and it could start week 1, but it could also start some point this year. I think the minimum is, they kind of dabble around, maybe he gets to being the 1A, but it's still a quasi committee there. I think the minimum outcome here is he's going to be a breakout candidate for year 2, massively so, talked about heavily January through month X. And you're going to have someone that a lot of times in Superflex, he drifts to the second round. Are we kidding, Ren? Are we kidding with this? So I just think that you have someone that if things go right for him in year 1, it could be Nick Chubb style. He's rolling with the job at some point, and it's just from that point forward, well, everybody else is injury away now. We'll kind of assess who we think the backup is, but we know who the starter is. And I think that's a more likely outcome than Sermon is a slow rookie year guy, and Raheem Mostert's healthy and he runs with the job, and then even if he gets dinged up, it turns into Jeff Wilson. No. That is not the primary or most likely outcome, where if there's an injury and Sermon wasn't the guy at that point, that he is still not the guy. That is a very unlikely outcome.
Yeah. So, Chad, real quick question for you: What is the round and the position for NFL draft picks that is most likely to go up in valuation from the rookie year to the second year?
I'm guessing it's got to be one of the day 3 wide receiver rounds. I'm going to guess round 5, 6. It's not 4. You would think it's 4, but it's actually 5, 6.
No, it's third round running backs. 71% of them have historically, it was a little Analytics Dynasty research from this past year. 71% of them have gone up in valuation after their rookie year. So what that tells me is a couple of things. Well, I think the key thing in that is we're too low on them as rookies. Right. If something is going to consistently go up in valuation as a class, the market's undervaluing them. And I think that the thing with Keyshawn Vaughn right now is really there are significant segments of the dynasty community and the advice community in particular that are sort of hearkening back to this. And that is a classic case of recency bias. And I think that that's something you really need to caution yourself on. When you hear that argument, that's a sample size of 1. And I would say it's a bad sample size. It's not a representative sample size of this situation either. The other thing, Chad, the other question that I have for you is there is one player. Kyle Shanahan's been an offensive coordinator or a head coach for 13 years in the NFL since 2008. In his career, there's been one running back drafted higher than Trey Sermon. Do you want to guess at who it was?
I don't want to spoil it. I would venture there's not many that are drafted as high as Trey Sermon.
There is one. There's one in his career, and it is Tevin Coleman. So that's 73 overall to Atlanta when he was in Atlanta. That's the highest. Wow. So Trey Sermon's the second one. Just ahead of Steve Slayton. Terrence West was 94 as well, but he wasn't there. He was with Terrence West, I think, for a year in Cleveland. But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty interesting and notable thing given, the Shanahan thing goes back to, I was playing fantasy football, like as a rookie when they were doing the whole running backs don't matter thing back in the 90s in Denver, and like Alandis Gary and Mike Anderson and all these guys. Like, this has been a thing that they've done. So I think when when they've spent up for this, I think it is a notable situation.
Because if even undrafted and late day 3 guys can produce, imagine some acumen of a top 100 pick kind of rolling within said system. And I also, one thing, I mean, I don't think many people are going to talk about Trey Sermon for 10, 15 minutes and not bring up this name. But imagine Trey Lance with pressuring the backside of run plays. And that actual run element that Garoppolo, Nick Mullins, some of these iterations have not at all. Shanahan's going to have some fun because he finally, for the first time in a while, has a mobile quarterback with the 49ers here. So that's pretty enticing and well as an optimizer of running back touches from that level too. So you figure Trey Lance is going to get in there at some point this year. So yeah, that's a big one. And again, Trey Sermon, I wouldn't have thought. I thought he would venture up, and with the landing spot, I thought he would challenge and maybe surpass in some drafts Javonte Williams in terms of cost. That did not occur. So I was pretty surprised that within this class, and I think that's a very accurate prism you painted early on in the show, which is the fact that there's not a lot of warranting distraction players to keep you out of the Trey Sermon business, in the zone he's going in the draft, because, Devonta Smith, there's some cautionary flags with that. Jalen Waddle, he is not, the prototypical looking top 5, top 10 NFL draft pick, for example. Start one, just go Trevor Lawrence over him, positional value. In terms of that, to me, that's more of a floor than a ceiling thing. So those are the guys venturing around. Rashad Bateman, yes, first round pedigree, but wide receiver first round, and certainly going to a little more of an ambiguous spot in terms of what do we expect out of the gate, with the quarterback he's tied to. So yeah, plenty of questions there. But yeah, Trey Sermon, and I think the other thing, don't forget about the other guys. We're talking all about Trey Sermon, but we've seen this running back or many backfields go to running back 3, 4, even 5, guy off the street by the end of the fantasy season. And this is one you mentioned with a bunch of guys in the past with Kyle Shanahan that they are going to get a lot and squeeze a lot from that sponge, no matter who it is, late in the year. So this is where we get into the season, and this is one of the few backfields where the running back 3 is more interesting than other backfields. That if you got a rotational spot, because if they're a backup in San Francisco, all of a sudden they'll be picked up in your dynasty league that week if there's an injury changing things. So that's why you want to keep an eye out. Does Mostert ever get dropped? Does Jeff Wilson, who's probably more likely, get dropped? You start putting him on your watch list. You start saying, do I have a spot? Is there a better running back than taking a 49er option this week to kind of get another poker chip if one or two guys tweak a hammy or roll an ankle? So just keep that in mind. This is Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara, episode 54 of the Footballguys Dynasty Show. If you're into shows like this, you're a serious fantasy player. And over at footballguys.com, we have the tools that you need to have your best year yet, whether it's redraft, DFS, Dynasty. You want to give you the edge, save you time, and you make more winning decisions. Those are the key aspects. Right now, there's an early bird discount available. It's the top right corner. Join now on the homepage. Takes you right to it. Discounts in play, and everything goes behind the paywall in July. And right now, we've got pretty much, you're going to start seeing a steady stream. Yes, regular scheduled feature content, but these collaborative pieces that have been starting on the backside, there's a couple of them out. You're going to get a number of different opinions about veterans changing teams right now, but you're going to get a number in terms of players that are going to help you win your draft and win your league specifically for 2021, because that's what we're playing for. We're trying to hoist hardware in 2021, build a great dynasty team. Let's worry about 22 and 23 when we get there, and it starts by being successful and having those building blocks in 2021. So get that early bird discount, and it's the same league winning information and guidance, but you're getting a discount on it if you sign up today. We'll do the work and you do the winning. So let's get to some dynasty trades. And I love when I see the market in an unsettled form, and you got teams jostling for positions. You got rookie craze out there for picks, but you've also got teams in the backdrop taking some of these profiled veterans and saying, I'm going to try to really improve my lineup. We've made a number of those types of trades together. What do you think about 106 in Superflex, Keenan Allen and Raheem Mostert for 106.
That's interesting that Mostert would sort of be involved with that. The interesting thing about that is that I'm wondering what's there, right? Because if that's QB4, probably not digging it. If that's running back 1, I think it's a different conversation, right? So I think that I think what you do with that 106 matters in terms of the profile that you're getting. If that's Najee Harris, I'm in. If it's Zach Wilson, probably not, right? If it's if it's Etienne, I'm in. Right. I think the who's available at 106 and what pick that is, I think would matter a little bit. Generally, I think you're probably getting someone there, unless you're going quarterback. I think that it probably has a more insulated profile than Keenan Allen. I will say, I think Keenan Allen's probably one of the most underrated players in Dynasty, but you get a chance to reset the clock. I mean, if it's a first round running back, I mean, that's really very valuable historically. So I would lean that way. But if you're going to take quarterback 4, if you're going to take Zach Wilson, I think I'd probably rather have Keenan Allen. Yeah,
that's exactly how I would answer it. I'm actually a little surprised. Like I think the fair deal is you bump down a little bit, bump down 2, 3, 4 spots. And that's probably where the market is on Keenan Allen, that later first in Superflex, where you venture down. Because, if you can get a first round running back, I think you got to jump on that. Now, if you're venturing a little lower and you're talking Devonta Smith or Jalen Waddle, to me, give me Keenan Allen. I'm going to bank on that as opposed to getting the next big thing of, again, profiles that I'm not a huge fan of out of round 1 this year for the wide receiver position. All right, so this involves 2 players we've been recommending in terms of the market and being a little undervalued right now, but we're pitting up against each other. So we've got a 1 quarterback format. It's Mike Evans and given a first next year for Ezekiel Elliott.
Interesting. How loath I am to give up a future first. I hate it with every ounce of my being. It's interesting that you could actually get that much for Zeke at this point, and it's probably only because the person is trading someone that is equally disrespected in terms of Mike Evans. Yeah, I'm interested sort of your thought on that. It's a roster construction deal. I mean, I think you get a little bit more insulated with Evans. I think Zeke has a higher upside. I hate trading future picks just because it limits my flexibility. But I'm interested in your sort of take on it. I could see both sides.
It's 1 quarterback. So that lens helps in terms of dealing the pick. Let's also make this assumption. If you're acquiring Ezekiel Elliott, and frankly, both of these teams might be contenders, based on what they're doing. So under that guise, I would also say this. I think Zeke has a chance in terms of warp and, what he provides. What he does this season, or what I think he's going to do, and certainly is capable of doing with a full strength Cowboys offense, looking at you, Dak Prescott, I think that he could provide more this season, as much as I might love Mike Evans, that Mike Evans does over the next 2 seasons or 2.5 seasons. A stud running back season provides that much. So I would say this. You're a strong team. You're adding Zeke to your lineup already. Mike Evans was expendable. That's, projecting ahead, that's probably going to be a later first. And it's 1 quarterback. So you're not getting the boost there. So I know there's 2 or 3 running backs of note. The wide receiver class has some depth, and I have some questions, though, about it for next year, like looking from a Devy lens. So again, if that ends up being a later pick, you're adding Zeke, you're obviously helping your chances by potentially 2 wins. So I think there's a very good case to say that's worthwhile giving up the pick for a difference-making running back over, even if it's a 2-3 year window here that he's entering age 26 season.
Yeah,
but I hate to give up first, just like you.
I hate to give up a first. That's the problem with it. I do think, though, you're basically trading between pseudo distressed assets, which is pretty amazing. I would look, if I'm trying to acquire Zeke, I'd look to do it a different way and pivot off of Mike Evans, because if you're the Mike Evans, if you're the GM that has Mike Evans on their team, I think that person that person probably isn't valuing Mike Evans at the extent that they should, and make a pivot in terms of figure out a different player to go with, and you'll probably be able to extract Zeke at a little bit lesser price would be sort of my take. But Derek did point out in the chat, which is notable, 40-point week 16 2020 with lots of dollar signs around that week 16 2020. So that will always have that.
Yep. So good points there. Now this one I wanted to discuss. This is a perfect trade example talking about quarterback value in a one quarterback league. So not very pronounced. Few really move the needle much, whether it's trading or in lineups over the field. So we've got Kyler Murray for a 22 first, second, and a not insignificant throw in Ronald Jones.
This is one of those things where it's tough to get, as crazy as it sounds, it's tough to get a future first for a quarterback. So you get a non-insignificant throw in terms of Ronald Jones. I question the Ronald Jones upside. But this is a very realistic scenario where you can have Kyler Murray as a quarterback 2 on your team. And like, that's not, or a pretty close to where it's, him and I don't know, Lamar Jackson, him and Dak, guys that are in a similar type of strata, just by their acquisition cost. And it's a very illiquid market to sell a quarterback. It's very difficult to do in start one to get significant return for a quarterback. So given that, depending on the construct, I don't mind if you can get multiple pieces. You get a first and a second, and you can get a potentially a contributing piece. Like, it doesn't seem like a ton for what is a first round super flex startup pick, but given his cost, I think that in start one, I actually don't think it's that bad of a deal.
Yeah, the thing I would point out in a one quarterback is sometimes you want to offload your QB 2 or 3 on your depth chart, and frankly, there's no audience for that. There's no secondary market because that's not upgrading anybody's anything. So they're not going to pay a second round pick for like Kirk Cousins, if they already have Josh Allen or Aaron Rodgers or something. So that's just not going to happen. So what I've said before is a lot of times, now you become the team that may explore something in the future, but you trade Kyler Murray and you keep, whoever you have. It's Cousins or Matt Ryan or Tannehill or, it's viewed as one of the lesser options, but yet you like their upside. You're like, I'm not that far behind, unless Kyler Murray is, Dak Prescott on a per game basis from last year or Josh Allen, like they really don't move the needle that much. So I think this is your way to pare down your depth chart, save a roster spot. Yeah, you pick up a player in this instance, but you get that first, you get that second. You're just not able to get that. And I could see passing on that, certainly if you have Mahomes. But I think almost everybody else is kind of in play for a deal like this, especially if you start accumulating. Like if you got Dak and Josh Allen and maybe you got a third guy, it's like, you got to have a long-term plan. Like in your typical 25, 26, 28 man roster, three quarterbacks is kind of tough to tote for long. So just be careful that you have some sort of exit plan, or you're always kind of looking out the corner of your eye. And guess what? Rookie draft time might be a time that you're able to do that. But certainly at some point in season, when somebody has an injury, you got to be prepared to strike in and be the helper to get a deal like this done, because it helps you in 2 or 3 different ways. All right. Looking ahead at which one? All right. So this is an example of rookie fever, in my opinion, but I want your take on this. So being on the clock in a one quarterback league at 103. And again, the draft went kind of haywire based on the fact that the pick would have been Najee Harris. So is that, I guess it would go. Yeah. So I guess it went Chase Pitts. Maybe. I've seen ETN over Harris maybe once or twice, not that often. So again, something goes haywire. So you're on the clock. Now you're the pretty girl at the dance. You're in demand. You hold the cards. And they traded that pick for Alvin Kamara.
They traded the pick so they traded Najee Harris pick for Alvin Kamara. Wow. Right. Man, talk about you're resetting the clock. I don't know. You get that hammer with Kamara, it's just tough because I've thought about pivoting from him, and it's like whatever I pivot to just doesn't have that same level of like can absolutely bend the arc of a season by himself. And even if Harris is good, like really good, Kamara just has more upside. And in a 3 or 4 season window, I just give me Kamara.
You know what's crazy? There's something that I would have never guessed if you had asked me previous to actually looking. He never had 200 carries in the NFL.
Kamara's never had 200
carries.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, he's topped out in the 180s and 190s, but he catches a ton of passes and scores a lot. and yet, yeah, and he's missed 1-2 games per year basically. So that's been part of it. But the fact that he's been under 200 and yet such an impact player. And here's an example of something I highly recommend. So it's another one involved with Mike, but it's an in-draft rookie, which you always be thinking about all the angles when your league is going on. This is basically your startup every year. This is the one draft you have where everyone's kind of been and shaken or at least open to the possibility. So this is a 1 quarterback league, 103, and they trade a 22 first for 104. So they move back 1 spot and Mike Evans. So you're giving a first for Mike Evans and you're moving back 1 spot.
I hate giving up future first, but this is a start 1. So you're probably dropping from, you might not be moving out of the ETN tier, right? Is that,
yeah.
If you're sitting at 104, right? If you drop from 103 to 104 and grab ETN and Mike Evans, I think you're winning.
Pitt's going ahead of ETN a decent amount. So,
right.
That would be the thing that I would, ETN 4.
Yeah. That would be the thing that I'd have to wonder is what you got at 104, because if you're getting ETN there, I think it's a smash, personally.
Yeah, I agree with you, and that's just again an example where do your tiers. Where are the big drop offs? Because if like we were saying, if we're going to take Trey Sermon at 6, then the drop off from 6 to 8 is pretty pronounced, and the drop off from 6 to 10 is similar, right? So if it's 6, and we've said this before, like in a startup draft, if it's Mahomes as 101 and then dropping to 2 or dropping to 10 should cost the same if you're moving out of that position because you're moving off of your target, which is Mahomes. So just keep that in mind of you may be open to going, trading down farther because, hey, I can get a much better deal. If I move down this far, I'll get a future first out of it. And me moving 1 spot or 8 spots, to me, isn't that big of a deal, but let me try to get the big add-on piece. But just keep that in mind about tiers and target players. Last one here, and this is a really interesting profile question. So 1 quarterback again, Clyde Edwards-Helaire and 104 for DK Metcalf.
Man, if that's ETN, if you're talking ETN and Clyde
Edwards-Helaire, 2 first-round running backs, 2 first-round running backs at 22 years old or under.
Yes, I mean that is.
I don't know how much you like Metcalf, but my first thought was, I think playing probabilities and playing range of outcomes. As much as I like Metcalf, I don't know how you can take that side.
I mean, that is just there is no better platinum profile in terms of non-quarterback skill positions than 21-year-old rookie running backs who are first-round NFL draft picks that produce a top 24 seasonal finish. That is,
and you're somehow getting on the rebound.
Yeah, you're getting him at
depressed value going into year 2.
Right, exactly.
It's unbelievable. And like you're saying, you're getting add-on to that. And again, it's not that anyone would ask you to do Metcalf for Edwards-Helaire straight up, and that's the whole point. This trade is actually realistic because you're talking about a multiple round bump in startup draft, roughly, and you add on a first to be able to get that done. All right, finally, let's close up with some quotes from the Footballguys Dynasty forums this week. The only reason so many of us accept running back value is simply because we're used to it. Running back being so valuable as a position. The only reason we accept that running backs have the valuation in fantasy that they do is because we're used to it.
As opposed to what? That they should
as
be
opposed
less valuable?
to, well, yes, that they are posturing that they are overvalued, that it's a transient position. Look at all these injuries, and the fact that so many are replaced and then not good, and again, just a less durable position in Dynasty. That why wouldn't you just take as many wide receivers as possible?
Well, I mean, we've got plenty of data to suggest that taking as many wide receivers as possible is a horrendous idea. As much as that, might be advised in other places, you'll never hear Chad and I say that. I do think, to a degree, there's a little nuance to that statement. Early in a draft, in a startup draft in particular, if you're going to break ties, I tend to break them towards a wide receiver as a general rule. I think this year could be a little bit of an exception because you're going to get Mike Evans in round 7 of a super flex startup draft. And I mean, that's pretty tough to pass up. So if you're sort of if you're sort of plotting out a board, do I want to take Cooper in the 6th and Evans in the 7th? Or do I want to take like CeeDee Lamb in the 3rd, where I could be taking, DeAndre Swift up there, someone like that. I'd rather go running back early, but as a general rule, give me elite wide receivers, and I can figure out running back with depth. But yeah, I don't. The idea that wide receivers are more stable, that's only true in the top, call it 75 picks of a startup draft. Outside of that, that is just the biggest myth going. And so, give me running backs in volume. Give me as many as I can get. Especially once I get a core of wide receivers locked down, like let's 2, 3, 4x running backs over wide receivers.
It's a big gamble valuing Devontae Adams as the wide receiver 1 or close to it. His value will take a huge hit whenever Aaron Rodgers leaves him, whether it's this offseason or next.
I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going anywhere, personally. And if he's going to be if Adams is a buy in this window, I mean, I think you got to entertain it. Yeah. And just to harken back, there's a comment in the show, in the comment to the show here about running backs are valuable, but have a shorter shelf life. I actually don't agree with that. And there's plenty of reason to suggest that, that's actually not true. When you actually measure it for some different things. So I would just caution people on that. It's a more nuanced thing than we're probably going to do here, but I think that's, at best, it's an oversimplification, and I don't think it's actually true. I don't think it actually holds true.
Well, I would say the same thing, especially when you're talking 21, 22-year-old running backs that are coming in and you get their whole prime window. So right. I do a lot of like this age stuff. It's not based on like, oh, how many snaps do they play in the NFL and for over how many years type measuring. It's more about, the prime windows and production and sort of that. And I think people would be a little surprised at how either A, close it is, or B, in what zones that running backs actually have the edge in capacities like that. So I think people look at raw age and they're not looking at, actual fantasy centric and production centric type stuff. Right. I'm having a hard time seeing people take Justin Fields over Zach Wilson. Clearly NFL scouts rated Wilson higher.
One NFL scouting system rated Wilson higher. We know that. We don't know about the others. I think that it's quizzical to me that Justin Fields fell as far as he did. I'm open to the idea that I'm wrong, but I saw the best player in the draft when I watched Justin Fields, period. He's better than any of the quarterbacks in this class from what I saw, period. In terms of his metrics, he's better than any quarterback in this class, period. Hard stop. There's no one better than him. I can't square that with the fact that he went as late as he did. So I'm open to the idea that I'm wrong. I'm open to the idea that there's something off the field there. But in terms of, because we know less than 1% about a player's life, right? We don't I mean, we see what 60 hours of a player a year, and that's not a lot when you're talking about 365 days in a year. That just there's something there that just doesn't make sense. Now, I will say the NFL, if you're gonna trust NFL draft order and like the top 10 to 12 of quarterbacks historically, has not mattered. The order in which they have gone off has not mattered. So if you treat them as random, I think the NFL has shown plenty of times that they will get it wrong, and there's no predictiveness in terms of the order which they take them. So that gives me some hope about Justin Fields, and I think that he sort of falls right along that line of where I would sort of feel they're in the same tier. I just think that success for Justin Fields looks a whole lot different than success for Zach Wilson looks. Success for Justin Fields looks something like Dak Prescott or Deshaun Watson when he's not in trouble. With Zach Wilson, it might look something like a better version of Baker Mayfield. And I think that when you need a difference maker, right? Give me the guy that can tilt leagues. I'm not sure Zach Wilson ever does that, and he might even be a very good NFL quarterback, but kind of like maybe in a poor man's Matt Ryan type of way, which I don't know how ultimately that tilts outside of a magical touchdown rate year. I don't know how it tilts the universe.
Yeah, and I think the other part is, again, we're drafting for fantasy production, and they are drafting for NFL prospects, and again, for specific teams, like you said, that Zach Wilson, I don't think the rushing upside difference-making value, which really tilts things for fantasy quarterbacks, is there. And I think Justin Fields, along with Trey Lance, provides a whole lot of that within this class. So that is something that, again, we're drafting for something different than the NFL is, by the letter of what we're doing here versus their front offices.
Can I pick your brain on one thing about Justin Fields? Do you have any concern about the fact that this looks like a dead man walking type front office and coaching staff, and the fact that they took him?
I don't know. I don't do storylines like that, so that's a really tough question for me. That's like getting in the weeds. That's asking me for me. We saw this picture of Justin, in Us Weekly, and it showed him in this type of T-shirt. Like, what do you think that means? Like, to me, that's I don't know. They took a quarterback that I think could maybe save their job. They got another chance. You don't see the same front office a lot of time get two top cracks at quarterbacks in the draft. A lot of times you get one guy, you attach yourself, and boom, you're gone. So. I'm open to all possibilities, and I don't think, again, I do think this, if they get ousted after 1 year, Justin Fields is the type of quarterback, especially if he didn't play the whole year and didn't look horrible, and he's going to be the type that is going to be appealing to an incoming new coaching staff. That there's hope of promise there. You're not going to a situation with an older quarterback where it's like, and I have a mid or later first. Oh, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. 1 of 32 in terms of coaching opportunities, but look what I got. Right. Like, okay, I'll do my best. But again, you're not giving me a whole lot of clay to mold into some great statue. All right, last one here. I've watched every snap he's played, referencing Jamar Chase. And being an LSU fan, when you make Justin Jefferson look like a good but not great player, the sky is the limit. The only thing that can slow this train down is injuries. If he stays healthy, he's a top 3 wide receiver without question.
We talking Justin Jefferson?
No, we're talking Jamar Chase.
Oh, man. Listen, I like Jamar Chase. I think it's a really good profile. But the success rate on those guys ain't that good.
It's not 100.
It's not anywhere near 100. It's like
not Kyle Pitts' tight end hit rate, and where they typically go. So yeah.
Right. It's not back half of the first round Travis Etienne hit rate either, or Najee Harris. I will on my rookie board, I've got Chase a tier below the other guys, Etienne, Harris, and Pitts. I think Etienne and Chase are closer, but I would take Etienne over Chase, just because if you have done that historically every time, if you've taken the first round running back over the first round wide receiver, it has been a historical landslide. I mean, you just do that every time, and it's going to be plus EV. Is this the time that it doesn't work out? I mean, yeah, sure. There's chances that 40%, the 40% outcome hits over the more likely outcome. Yes, but I think ultimately, if you make that decision, you just kind of set it and forget it. You're taking the first round running back over the first round wide receiver. It's a huge success rate. After that, I mean, Chase is the clear wide receiver one, and I like the profile. I mean, he on national television buried a guy. I mean, just a first round draft pick, AJ Terrell. I mean, just killed him up and down the field like multiple times. It was almost sad to watch. So I know that he can play. But the transition from college to the NFL is something that we've seen with guys that we really like. Corey Davis, I mean, being an immense prospect who just never really got all the way there. And, so with all that said, I think that it's an elite talent. But I think ultimately I'll always defer to the elite running backs over the elite wide receivers that early in a draft.
And yeah, running back hits earlier. In general, they hit very strongly, and that is very liquid. You get a running back with some pedigree, with a job that's producing, you have a lot of options. Now, wide receivers, a little more acquired taste. I know, there's going to be some insulation there with Jamar Chase, but just keep in mind, anything but an electric start, and there could be a potential secondary buy window with wide receivers if you so choose. And that's the thing. I mean, it used to be year 3 breakouts, and now people get impatient. It used to be all about the third year breakout wide receivers, and now it's if it's 2 years and you haven't hit in the top 20 or 24, it's like, what are we doing? Why are we wasting our time? We're stuck in neutral. We're stuck in reverse with this pick. And the fact that you're dropping a high first, I'll just say, I mean, again, high first. You go running back when the pedigree warrants over wide receiver, and this year we got a couple of them. So be wary of passing on said profiles. As much as I like Jamar Chase, and when you say top 3, that requires a lot of the research I do in terms of situations. You probably need a tier 1 quarterback to do that, and a tier 1 quarterback is top 8. Is Tua top 8? That is very much a question mark, and I would say right now the high probability is on no. He is not a tier 1 quarterback. Could he be? Could he surprise? Could that be the breakout offense? Absolutely. But it's not there. It's not a projectable one like some of these other tier 1 passing game, tier 1 quarterbacks. So Jamar Chase needs to be the guy. He needs to be on one of the offenses with one of the quarterbacks. That's the scenario to have the outcome you just suggested, especially if it's this year or next year, early on the developmental curve for a 21-year-old wide receiver, which again, very good profile, but one that if you're expecting all these, top 15, top 20, type breakout rookie, yeah, we are fast tracking production at the wide receiver position. It's a pass happy league and very friendly rules. However, it's still not the norm. That is the exception for Justin Jefferson type scenarios in year 1, just occurring right out of the gates there. All right, we discussed a lot of things in this episode. We started out about 15 minutes on the 49ers backfield there, broke it down on a variety of angles with Trey Sermon. In the trading, we talked about 1 quarterback trading. We talked about rookie draft trading when you're on the clock. Profiles there. We talked a lot about guys like Mike Evans, Ezekiel Elliott, as well as Kyler Murray, Alvin Kamara, and guys like Najee Harris, and those profiles early in round 1. I am Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And until next time, good luck in your Dynasty leagues.